What's up, pod pals? It's your buddy Adam, and you are listening to Podcasting Business School, the show where I teach podcasters how to love their podcast like a hobby and build it like a business. I've got one of my favorite, most requested guests back on the show, Katie Krimitsos from the Women's Meditation Network, and we're doing a celebration episode.
Woo!
100 million downloads. How in the world did this happen? How do we get there? We're going to talk about all things 100 million downloads. Katie Krimitsos, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Adam. So good to be here. I should have hired you to do like a 100 million like voiceover that I could send out to all the, local TV stations and national news and all that stuff. That would have been great.
That's my high ticket offer,
I got you covered. Let's have a conversation afterwards.
In a world full of terrible meditation podcasts, one has meditated to the very top, the Women's Meditation Network. This time, we're meditating for real.
There we go.
There we go.
We got it. I got it right there.
10K offer. All right. So, Katie, last time you came on the show, we talked a lot about growth strategies. Obviously, things are working. 100 million downloads.
Yeah.
That's a giant number. And to be honest, most podcasters don't hit that. I want to know, like, what is a kind of beginning benchmark that you remember hitting that you were so psyched about, whether it's, anything that was you consider to be a benchmark. It doesn't even have to be download number wise, but I remember when I got my first email from somebody that listened to my show and I was like, oh my God, somebody's listening and they don't even live in the United States, crazy. So anything you remember early on that were kind of like benchmarks for you that you celebrated?
Yeah. A handful of them. I remember 3 months into starting my very first show that's part of the Women's Meditation Network, the original. It's called Meditation for Women. I started it in July, launched it in July, and by October, we hit 5,000 downloads for that month of October. And the reason that was important is because at that time, I had, oh my gosh, how old was my other podcast at that time? 6 years? The podcast, I had a whole other podcast in business. And it was 4, 5, 6 years old at the time. I don't remember. And that one averaged about 5,000 downloads a month. And it was a very prosperous business for me. And so here I was 3 months into this brand new show and it hit 5,000 downloads for the month. And that was like the little universal sign, like, okay, you're on the right path, keep going. And then, another milestone was maybe a month or two later, I got an email. Speaking of emails, I got an email from a woman in Australia, not in the United States, like somebody's really listening out there. And she told me this incredible story of just incredible pain and heartache. And like, I'm talking real abuse, horrible stuff that has happened in her life. And basically said like, your meditations are the only reason that I'm still here. Like I'm sleeping because of your meditations. I'm waking up and making sure to like fill my head with all this good stuff in the morning. And literally it's the only thing that has got me over this hump and kept me going with my 4 children. And I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So I'm getting goosebumps thinking of it now. And then another really important milestone, for a very different reason, was March of 2020. I think all of us can sort of remember where we were in March of 2020.
I was at PodFest.
Yeah, at PodFest, right? And I had, kind of the ripples of the pandemic or the whispers of the pandemic were starting in those first couple of days. And I was starting to sort of put out other meditations, like extra meditations. Like I still only had that one show, Meditation for Women. And I remember that I just started putting out other extra meditations. I was doing once a week. I was like, let me see what else I could put out. Home from PodFest, country shuts down. And I was like, oh my gosh, like everyone was feeling like it's time to pause and stop. And I was feeling, I got to go. I got to speed up. There's more. I have to do more here. So I just started spouting off more and more meditations, as many as I could. And that month we hit 100,000 downloads, which was mind blowing to me. That was like a whole like new state of potential. Like, oh my gosh, I didn't know I could actually reach 100,000 downloads in a month. So those were really important milestones along the way, sort of in those first like year or two, that really to me were giant messages of like, yes, you're on the right path. Yes, you're doing the right thing. Keep going.
Yeah. And it's important to celebrate all the milestones. I'm somebody that I really like to promote podcasters being open about their numbers. And like you hear a lot of people talking about millions of downloads, and like you're legit. Like, like all these other mostly guys are like, I do 3 million downloads an episode. And they're not doing 3,000 downloads an episode.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy. So I
Yeah.
think we need to be more open and honest about our numbers, first thing, but also
Yeah.
celebrating those like first 1,000 downloads, first 1,000 download month,
Yeah.
first 1,000 downloads of your show, like little things like
They're
that.
huge. They're
Yeah.
so huge. Because I really believe that what it does is it wires our brain to sort of like cement that as a fact. Yes, 1,000 people, listen to my show, or 1,000 times. Somebody listened to my show 1,000 times this month. I'm going to cement that into my brain, and now know that not only am I capable of that, but now I need to think bigger. And now that's sort of what that 100,000 mile marker was for me. Like, oh my gosh, like, yes, I was very celebratory, and that's amazing, but it was shocking. But then it was sort of like, nope, that's my new standard. Now my brain has switched into, I know it can happen, not I believe it can happen. So now I know it could happen. So now what am I going to choose to believe that I know can happen in the future? So to me, it's a giant game of like, how can I expand my mind to start encompassing more of what's possible that
Yeah.
I couldn't have fathomed a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever that might be.
Yeah. And what we all have to keep in mind, and I constantly remind my listeners of this, is that most of us, 99% of us, are just like regular people with zero marketing background, no
Yeah,
social media following,
yeah,
no email list, no nothing.
yeah.
It's pretty freaking cool that we have 1,000 people listening to our show, and there's people from England emailing us and stuff like this. Like,
It's a big
that's
deal.
a big damn deal.
Yeah, it's a very big deal. It's a very, very big deal.
Yeah. So that's why I like the whole vibe at, obviously you're ingrained with the Podfest community with your husband, Chris. And
Yeah,
it's just like, I love that environment because you guys celebrate podcasting at all levels,
yeah,
and it's a great place to do that. But I think there's just gonna be more of that. Like I really like the 1,000 download club and like all that stuff, like that needs to be celebrated. So for all you that are listening out there, like see what Katie's doing here. And we're going to get into how she's growing her network and everything, but like see that as an example. Every niche is different. Every show is different. The growth patterns are different for all different types of shows and release cadence and things like that.
right.
But just make sure you celebrate your own stuff is what I'm trying to say here. So all that being said, I'd love to dive in with you, Katie, a little bit about what you see is working. Like what is helping you grow at this level? And I'll just kind of leave that as an open-ended question, and we can take it where you want to take it. So
Yeah.
I'll give you the reins.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you asked me this because, it's gone through many different evolutions of what you right now we're 5 years old. So, what worked for us in the beginning, might have petered out, and all of a sudden we need to kinda do something new, and that's sort of the life cycle of marketing, right? It's like just I feel like, and I can't claim to be the best marketer, to be honest with you. Like, I definitely lean heavily on my husband, Chris, who is a genius marketer, to really constantly play and experiment with what's gonna work. So where we are now, I would say in the past year, what has really worked are, paid ads. That's been a pretty standard part of my marketing formula since day one, like actually paying to be on a podcast app, to be on a banner on a
Yep.
podcast app. And I've, sort of like faded away from a lot of it, but there's only like, 1 or 2 that I still will do regularly. So that's one. My thought process there, and I know you and I have gone into a deep dive about this in prior episodes, but my thought process there is like, if you can choose to experiment with $100 on a paid podcast app ad and just see the conversions, like it's a numbers game. There's no gray fluff on did it work, did it not? Like you
Yeah.
literally see the numbers. And so it's a really fun one to experiment with and just start figuring out how to budget that, right?
Yep.
So that's one. The second one that we have done a lot of this year, is PR, and this is a different one for me. In my old podcasting life, I was, face forward. My face was my brand, and I loved it. I was all on social media. I was posting every single day. Like it was literally like my brand and my face were one. So I was definitely in that vibration of that energy. Ever since I started Women's Meditation Network, I started it when I was, pregnant and had a 2.5-year-old and literally just kind of wanted to be quiet, go into my closet and not talk to anyone and just write and record and do that. And was just like, I don't care, I'm going to figure this out. And it grew without social media for a long time, actually. So it's only been recently that I've sort of figuratively come out of the closet and said, okay, I'm ready to be the face of this brand. I very deliberately kind of created it to not be my face because I wanted it to, I didn't want people to identify with me per se. I wanted people to identify with the brand, the feeling, the message, all that sort of stuff. It has kind of kicked me in the butt at this point in time because it's now requiring me to personalize it so much more. And that is kind of that PR piece that I'm stepping into to make sure that, every listener knows my name. I mean, I know that sounds weird, but like I didn't have a personality driven podcast for a long
Yeah.
time. It was literally like, just get into the meditation. Here we go. I mean, you're going to know my voice and I'm taking you through words that are going to kind of show you who I am, but I'm not having a conversation with you about like, I hope you enjoy this meditation. I made it for my kids because, oh my gosh, they were really bothered. Like, you don't know anything about my life when you listen to this show. So, or any of the shows. And so that has been relatively new of really infusing my personality into that. And I correlate that with PR because it's that same energy of putting my face out there and putting my story out there. And so that's worked in the sense of making sure to get media attention, using these milestones. We just had a big celebration for the 100 million milestone mark, and it was a big mindset shift for me to see that as like, yes, I'm celebrating this. This is a really big deal, but also it's also a very conscious PR play. Like I'm wanting to get the attention of other people so that more and more women can really have this as a resource. So, and we've just continued to kind of like do different ones here and there, getting on interviews, making sure I'm known, making sure the story is known, making sure the brand is known, all that sort of stuff. So that's another area that's worked really well. And then um, one,
I've got a quick question about
yeah,
that.
yeah, go
Okay,
ahead.
so this has been something that's popped up in my head a few different times as I approach different milestones and like with that, like doing a news release, like local podcaster hits blah blah blah. I mean, is that worth it? Is that something that you did? How do we pull this off? Because I've not
Yes.
successfully pulled it off.
So there's a couple of people, like a couple players at hand, if you will. So I'll just kind of go through what we did back in May to do this celebration, that are just a small sampling of ideas that you could do. So we knew this milestone was coming up. So I immediately asked sort of like, okay, who do I know and who does like my husband know, like, that we have personal relationships that we could call up and I know works for like local news and I've gone on that news show before. So can I call them up and be like, hey, I'm celebrating this milestone. Can you cap me on again? Like, so that was a first round. Then we have a relationship with a gentleman locally who does like local news. So he's the one who would send all the pitches into like, local ABC, all that sort of stuff to get me on local TV, which worked really well. And then I had somebody else on my team who was what I would call digital PR. So that's somebody who was getting me on different podcasts, getting interviewed, like, sort of playing a role in like the Instagram and the Facebook visuals of like sharing about the milestones and all these things that are happening. And then we actually did an event. This is actually a really big piece of the PR play. So we did an event. It was like 50% to actually celebrate. I mean, we brought people in there. We had like, I don't know, 50 people, 50 to 60 people there who were all in to like celebrate. And I was giving a speech and it was beautiful. But we also did it very deliberately to invite media people there, and also be able to to create assets to then be able to distribute to media, local and national, meaning good photos of Katie and the 100 million graphic right behind her.
Right.
And, photos of Katie hugging all my podcaster friends and, the people who listen to my show and all that sort of stuff. So that had a ripple effect and definitely got me on not only local news, but got me featured in a lot of like national news, all that sort of stuff. So that's just a sampling of some of the things that we did. So are the press like submissions of press releases doable? Absolutely. If you have any milestone coming up, just think about like, how can I celebrate this? Not from a space of ego, but from a space of like, I know what I have is special and I want more people to have access to it. And, because I know it's gonna help more people. So who has the megaphones, right? Who's out there and has the eyes on them, the ears on them, and how can I get in front of them to share? And how can I angle this story to make it work for their audience in a way that is a win-win-win, right?
That's huge. Yeah, that's a great tip. Like the win-win-win. You got to think about what's good for us, what's good for the company or the promotion, and then what's good for the reader, listener, viewer.
Yep, exactly.
And if we can hit that, that's the key. And I know that there are people out there that are like they're having that imposter syndrome conversation in their head, but I've only done 50,000 downloads, or I'm just doing 100,000 downloads. Like, what do you think is in your mind? Like, when should we start putting this out there? Like
Yeah.
100,000 download mark? Like, what do you think?
I mean, I don't know if there's a number. I think it's just the angle of the story. And I want to make sure you hear me when I say, even with a 100 million download milestone coming up, I still had imposter syndrome. Like, I mean, what's the big deal? Like, I'm just like doing my thing over here. And it's not until I get my freaking crew around me who's like holding up mirrors going, Katie, you have built an audience. You are impacting people all over the world at a big number. Like only 0.1% of other podcasts ever hit this number. That's kind of a big deal. And you're doing it from your, you know, 2 foot by 10 foot closet squished in here. And you're doing it when the kids are asleep. Like there's a story there. And I don't
Yeah.
think that way because I'm like, this is just how I do it. I'm a hustler. I'm just going to do it. Right. I'm going to get it done.
Yeah.
So the number itself doesn't matter. What you're doing, how you're doing it, the story you can create, for the sake of it being sexy and appealing and ultimately helpful to the person who's going to see that story. That's really where you want to think.
Yeah. So you got my wheels turning because I'm with my podcasting career combined, I'm getting ready to hit 1 million downloads, which I'm very excited about. I did 550,000 with Million Pound Mission, and now we're approaching 400,000 with Podcasting Business School. So we're within striking distance. It's going to happen probably this year.
Yay.
So if I were to approach a PR company or do a press release, it's not local podcaster celebrates 1 million downloads. It is local work from home father.
Yep.
Works 3 days per week, impacting people across the world, teaching podcasting, reaches 100 or reaches a 1 million downloads or something like that. Like that's the story.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
You got it. What angle, what finds it? What you always want to ask yourself is like, what can people relate to? I've never been embarrassed of my closet. I'm very comfortable with, how small my house is, how I'm squeezed in here. It's so fine with me. But last year, so like May of 2022, there was a story. A friend of ours works for the Tampa Tribune. And we sort of wanted to do this big push for like Mother's Day and the month of mothers, right? And, here's this woman who has all these meditations for any woman, but specifically for moms too. And so he came in and he took this picture of me recording a meditation in my closet. And you see the stacks of dirty clothes. I mean, they're not dirty, they're all clean, but it's not perfect. I mean, I've got clothes hanging everywhere. You see my bed sort of undone a little bit, but I'm literally in my closet. I cannot tell you how many people have reached out to me because of the relatability of that. They felt like, oh my God, that's me. That's what my closet looks like. Or, basically like she's me. I can see myself in her. And in that, there's inspiration for a gazillion different reasons. And it doesn't really matter what the reason is. But like if you can show up, share who you are, and just know that to angle that in a way that's relatable and inspiring and like a wow factor, like that, it's really cool. And it's cool to hear those stories about like, oh my God, I read that stuff. I had neighbors who I would pass every day walking my kid to school. And they're like, oh my God, Katie, I just read that story. I cannot believe you do that from your house. I'm like, yeah, that's me.
Yeah.
But it's interesting enough to then have them go listen to my shows,
Yeah. A funny aside, recently, I was filming an Instagram video. I have my daughter, Hannah. She's, 8 years old and super cute. And anytime she helps me out with an Instagram reel, I get way more views.
Of course.
So I've got her, she's got this big head of hair and she's doing this like head banging thing, slow motion. I got November Rain on there, or like Smells Like Teen Spirit or something. And I film a thing. I don't even remember what it was about. I asked my wife, like, hey, what'd you think of that video with Hannah? And she's like, well, I'd like it a lot better if my underwear wasn't hanging up in the background on the laundry rack. I was like, oh, like
that's real.
Just got real. Just got real.
Really real. Oh my gosh.
IG really real. Now, before we move past what's working now, one
Yeah.
other question I had that I get a lot. You mentioned podcast, paid ads, banner
Mhm.
ads, which I talk about a lot, like, advertising on Overcast FM and things like that.
Mhm.
Um, do you have a strategy budget wise? Like, I know you have sponsorships and things like that coming in. Are you setting aside a certain percentage to reinvest? Any
Yeah.
thoughts on that sort of a situation?
Yes. So I set aside about 15 to 20% of total revenues for marketing. Um, and I wanna make sure it's clear. I had a really hard time at wrapping my brain around this financially. I tend to be very black and white with numbers. So, like, if it's, my revenues are going up and down every single month. So I'm like, "Well, how am I supposed to do this? And what percentage?" Anyway, so I really just I look back 3 months and I say, "Okay, what's the average, income I did or gross revenue I did 3 months ago?" And then that's, 15 to 20% is what I'll spend on a marketing budget in total, right? Any PR we're doing, any paid ads, anything that we're doing, Facebook ads, whatever that may be, and that's what I'll do. So that's just been pretty standard, and over time I'll just sort of like uh, um generalize, meaning like, okay, for our average revenue for the past 6 months has been X. So just moving forward, we're going to do this X amount of dollars. In 3 months, we'll sort of reassess and see if we need to move that up or down.
Yeah. So I think just having a strategy period is good for it's like paying ourselves.
Yeah.
Podcasters, the three things that we don't want to give the money up for is paying ourselves, marketing, and hiring a coach. Like those are the three things, like, I don't need to do this. And like those are probably the three things that we need to do the
I was gonna say
most.
those are the 3 that have the biggest impact. A
Yeah.
coach, hiring a coach, is gonna expand your mind so you can grow into who you're supposed to grow into, right? That's really and they're of course, they're gonna give you strategies, but the mind stuff is actually the most important. And then, doing marketing and putting money into marketing, that's your fuel. Like, if you and I believe me, I did not always believe this, so I have been converted. I was like, "Oh, just organic stuff. As long as I do good work, people will show up." I'm sorry, there is way too much content out there. Like, you really, unless you're just one of those lucky ones who just got picked up organically and like, yay, it's working. Like, even if you are experiencing relatively good organic growth, it can always increase. So, that's your fuel to keep on going. So, and then obviously paying yourself, you got to sustain yourself. Like, these are the three most important things that you really need to budget for in your business.
Yeah. And if you guys listening in, if you use the profit first system like I do, shout out to Mike McAllowitz,
Yeah.
inside that operating expense bucket, you could divvy that up. If you're doing like 30% operating expense for overall income, and you can divvy that up of like, okay, 3% is going to go to my coaching investment bucket, and 15% is going to go to marketing or whatever of
Right.
that OpEx account. So I'm a big systems guy. So that's how I have to operate. Like, I've got percentages busted out for retirement and my 401k, like the
Love
whole
it.
thing. I'm like, I
Love it.
have to do
Love it.
that. So otherwise I feel like I need to save this money. I need to squirrel it away in case of
Yeah.
emergency. So
Yeah.
if it's systematized, that helps me a bunch. Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you for breaking that down for us
Yeah.
there, Katie. The other kind of pivot I want to make with this conversation is, I feel like one of the most confusing terms in podcasting is podcast network. And there's it's kind of the Wild West. Like, a lot of people do it in a lot of different ways. It means a lot of things to a lot. It's very blurry with
Yeah.
what exactly it is. Should we try to be a part of one? And there's no rules. So I would like to have you kind of describe how the Women's Meditation Network fits into the overall network scheme of things, how you
Yeah.
define network, and what your network actually looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So, in my experience in podcasting, since 2000, oh my gosh, 14, I think I've been podcasting since then. Um, there are two ways that I've seen people define a podcast network. One way is what I would actually call a podcast media agency. So I have heard, oh, that's the podcast network that I want to be a part of. And it's actually an ad agency who's bringing, advertisements to multiple different shows, right? So that's not necessarily the term that I use or identify with. For me, what a podcast network is it's one larger brand who houses a bunch of different podcasts, okay, individual podcasts. And that brand itself is acting on the behalf of each of those individual podcasts. So the way an individual podcaster, to answer your question, if somebody's like, should I be part of a network? That would mean that, let's just call it Network ABC. My show is called, XYZ, and I want to plug into this network. That means I'm now making an agreement with that network that they are in charge of certain things that I no longer need to take care of. And I benefit from those things in a way, and they get a piece of the action, right? They get a piece of the pie. And the typical way of looking at that is, oh, they're taking care of advertising dollars for me, which is why the two different words can be confusing. They're the two different definitions. So that network itself can act on the behalf of many individual podcasts to bring in ad revenue and be able to place it with some of the other shows that they have. But they can do that because they're sort of like, they have the larger relationship. They have a lot more downloads or inventory, if you will, that they can now negotiate and get, better rates coming in and more ad revenue coming in, and they can place it on your show. In exchange for that, you're sort of giving up a certain percentage of that revenue, but now you've got somebody working on your behalf to, bring that in. A lot of times that might mean that they're doing some production for you, but this is really different for every single network. The way that I have structured my network is, as of now, it is 100% all mine. It's literally what I would consider an indie network. So, the Women's Meditation Network owns each of these individual 14 podcasts that we now have. They are all produced in-house. None of them are there has not yet been, although this is part of our growth strategy, there has not yet been another podcast that we've acquired and brought into the network that we have not created ourselves. Now, what it does mean, though, is that amongst these 14 podcasts, while my voice is the majority of them and my talent is the majority of them, there are still people there are still contractors and talent that I pay for writing scripts for certain shows, for voicing certain shows. And so there's actually 2 podcasts on my network where there's a different voice. There's like a whole different personality. A third one actually launches today. So, those have nothing to do with me. You'll hear my voice in the very beginning, sort of as a welcome, and you're part of the Women's Meditation Network. And, here's who I am, here's who your host is, all that sort of stuff. But, those voices have their own personalities. Those shows have their own personalities that are not mine, but yet my network, my brand has created those and owned those. So, the power of a network in both of these latter 2 examples is that I can now go to bat on behalf of all of my shows, and it can be a part of my growth strategy. Actually, that's, you asked what has been working for growth. What I didn't mention is sort of a hidden strategy called more shows. The more shows I have, and the more shows that I produce and the more shows that I could put out there, the more ears I can possibly get in front of and introduce them to other shows that are part of the network. So there's a lot of marketing benefit. It's like today we're actually launching Sleep Stories, our brand newest show. And there's a marketing component that goes on because I can now go announce Sleep Stories to all of the other different podcasts, all of the existing listeners there. And so every one of my brand new shows has this rush of immediate listeners, which is really beneficial. So, and then obviously the revenue is inclusive of that, in that I can really sell the network. I can sell different, combos of different shows to different advertisers, all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of benefit to it. I see it as the way I see myself is as a media company. I see myself as a production house. I'm a production house. I just happen to start in the audio production realm. But when I see myself as a production house and a publishing house, if you will, I can now see how many other areas of opportunities that I have based on the content and the system that I've created this first time around.
Yeah. Okay. Lots of questions. Because we're podcasters, that's what we're good at.
Yeah.
We're curious folk. I talk a lot on this show, especially my podcast audit episodes. When a listener comes on for podcast audit, my most given piece of advice is, drum roll, please, you got to change the name of your show because it's terrible.
Yeah.
So one of my rules is, when I read a name, I want to know what it's about and who it's for without any further explanation, because I'm not there to explain it. Yeah. So you've got 14 shows. Will you please rattle off a few names of these expertly amazing SEO shows. Just give us a few of them. They're awesome.
You hit it the nail right on the head. The SEO, very deliberately named shows. Meditation for women, sleep meditation for women, morning meditation for women, meditation for moms, meditation for anxiety, sleep stories. Oh my God, sleep. I literally have a podcast called Sleep. Um, Sleep sounds, daily affirmations. Yeah. So mindful meditation for women, healing meditation for women. These are incredibly boring titles, but every single one that I've launched has been incredibly intentional in that I am doing what I call podcast app SEO. I am searching if I were wanting to listen to a meditation, what would I search for? If I were in this mode, one of my more recent ones is called panic attack meditation, knowing that that would be a very niche show, but my God, is that getting a lot of, I mean, sadly, and also, yay, it's getting a lot of downloads already, a lot of attention already, because like somebody who's having a panic attack or who has experienced that is searching for that keyword, panic attack. And then if you type in panic attack, my podcast is the first one that comes up. So I'm very deliberately naming shows where you can see what it is right away. You know who it's for right away. And more than likely, it should be coming up when you start typing in some stuff.
Yeah. I talk about this all the time. You made me so happy as you just rattled off all the things that I always say. I'm like, oh, this just makes my podcasting heart warm. But people, like you said, it's straightforward. It's vanilla. It's exactly what it is. Podcasters get too damn creative with the names of their show.
I know.
And I'm dealing with all these people on podcast audits are like, the cutesy show name. And I'm like, look at each of those words of your cute title. Are any of those words being searched at all in any podcast player app
Exactly.
ever? No. Then you're screwing yourself. Like you're
Yeah.
not getting any organic reach at all. You're making it so much harder on yourself.
So much harder.
Be vanilla and plain with the title, be creative with the content. That's when we let the juices flow. So yes, take Katie's examples of all 14 of her shows. They're exactly, you know, who they're for, what they're about, keywords, identifying terms.
Yeah.
XYZ for XYZ. That's a great title.
And I want to take this actually a step deeper in that I just mentioned that launching new shows is part of our growth strategy. So when we are figuring out what show do we launch next, I am searching in keywords and saying what's missing in the space of meditation. What's missing? So I'll give you this sample: meditation for anxiety. Okay, so when I go into Apple Podcasts and I just type in meditation for anxiety is like the second or third or fourth auto corrected word or auto word that comes up, right? Phrase that comes up, and there is no show called meditation for anxiety. So I was like, I'm going to do an experiment and just call my damn show Meditation for Anxiety and see what happens. That show, without me doing actually a ton of marketing for it, I've only recently started doing marketing for it. I launched it in January, averages about 40,000 downloads a month. That is 100% organic, being in the right place at the right time with the right keywords. So, yeah, I mean, meditation for moms, same thing. I'm like, there's not a podcast called Meditation for Mom. I mean, there's like Mama Meditator, like there's creative versions of that, which all come up. That's great. But I'm like, I want to be the boring, you know, it's a gorgeous logo. So it's stunning. It stands out with both of those. But, you know, I want to be there when you are typing in exactly what you want. And I will be like, I'm exactly what you want.
Now, I wasn't supposed to let everybody know this, but Katie and I have been working on a special meditation for bald 43-year-old white men. And I'm going to be the voice and it's going to be like, close your eyes, sit back and relax.
I need to hire you right now.
Your F-250 crew cab.
Lower
your ATR 2100.
What is the like shaver you were telling me about? This episode is sponsored by the Headblade. We already have sponsors all lined up to go.
Gently caress your bald scalp into submission. Yes, very. I mean, keyword rich right there. Lots of people searching that.
I know.
Now, okay, 14 shows, weekly content, daily content. What's the cadence here?
The majority of them are daily.
Okay.
The relatively newer strategy is that anyone we launch is weekly until the audience tells us they want more, i.e., through comments or downloads numbers. So, like meditation for anxiety, we started weekly, but like within the first 2 weeks, we saw numbers skyrocket. So I was like, I got to put more episodes on. So yeah, so a couple of them are about 3 times a week. Then the other kind of newer shows are once a week. So
Okay.
we're like on an average month, 300-ish episodes across the network.
Okay. Okay. That's a lot of episodes. Nice. Okay. Do you think you've got my wheels turning on this? I'm kind of in mastermind mode. That's one of my goals for next year is start
Yeah,
building masterminds. And thanks to Podfest and things like that, I've kind of become known in the podcasting space. And there's a lot of up and coming podcast service providers, podcast coaches, editors, people in the podcasting about podcasting
yeah,
business. So I would love to create like a mastermind, but I could almost create a podcasts about podcasting network sort
in
of
a heartbeat.
situation. If I do something like that, is there an advantage to having everything in one RSS feed versus multiple RSS feeds? What do you think about that?
Well, so all of my individual 14 shows have different RSS feeds. There's no such thing as one RSS feed for the
Right.
network itself. That said, though, what you can do to experiment first, if you're like, maybe I should be a network, right? One thing, and this is absolutely what I did. One thing you can experiment is like on your main RSS feed, start experimenting with different types of shows. So let's say on Podcast Business School, every Monday you have, you know, a podcast PR company come in, or, and it's marketing focused. And then every Wednesday you have like organizational type experts come in, or,
Right.
blah, blah, blah. You get the drift. Um, and so what you could do is you could just see what the response is from your listeners about which shows they're really liking. And is it enough for you to kind of like spring that show off into itself, off by itself? And it's a really great way to, without any extra effort or money, just to experiment with the feed you currently do have and then create a new feed. So I literally have done this with just about every podcast that I have. But the notable one, because it was the first time I did it, was I had Meditation for Women, my original, and
Mhm.
that was the only show I had for like 2 years. And then I noticed, like, I'm a statistics junkie, so I'm always looking at my analytics, and I started noticing after 2 years, I'm like, man, like consistently 8 out of the top 10 shows are all sleep related. And, then it was like, "Oh, crap, I need to do a sleep show." Crap, because, like, oh my god, I have a one-year-old now, and it's pandemic time, and, I don't know if I could do it, but then it was like, how do I do it? So my second show was Sleep Meditation for Women with the original sleep pod episodes that I had on that original show. I just seeded them with
Nice.
that, thinking, "Oh, this will last me a couple months, and then I can do like one extra one a month." And then that show took off. Like in 2 weeks, it was like skyrocketing. It's still my largest show. And so I was like, "Well, got to do more for this one. Let's figure out how to create more episodes for this one." So, yes, so I would say you can absolutely start everything under one RSS to experiment. And then if it proves to you that there's an audience for each kind of topic, then you can spin them off.
So cool. So many ideas out there in the podcasting space. And it's just like it's just the tip of the iceberg. Like we are
Yeah.
so new compared to blogging and YouTubing and all this other stuff. Like there's so many opportunities out there. And I love seeing more podcasters come together and work together and collab and do things like experimental networks
Yeah. And
just
and let me say this too. You don't need anyone's permission or approval to be a network. Somebody who I highly respect, who has been in podcasting for a long time, who had like, at the time I talked to her, she had like 8 different podcasts. She's like, "So what did you have to do to become a network?" I'm like, tell yourself you're a network and
called it a
do it.
network.
Like,
Yeah.
just do it. Like, there's some logistics if you wanna be seen that way on Apple, right? But, like, you're a network. Like, make sure your branding is across everything, and, tell yourself you're a network. Just tell everyone else you're a network. Tell it that's how it works. So it's just a mindset of how you're organizing all of your stuff.
I love it. I think the first baby step to that is admitting that you're a media company. Like you
Yeah,
said earlier, like
yeah,
that's how you view yourself as a media company.
yeah,
That's the first baby step. And that was I heard somebody say that early on. I'm like, you know what? That's true. I'm broadcasting. I'm putting out online content. I've got people tuning in from all over the place. Like I am a media company. This is
yeah,
pretty cool.
yeah,
So and then if the network thing makes sense, then go for it. But I think it's a valid idea that more people need to consider whether they start their own or I just love the collaboration aspect of that where everybody benefits. It doesn't even have to be about sponsorship or anything like that. It could just be like a collaborative push to grow together. So That's the one to
Absolutely.
keep in
It could
mind.
be whatever you want. That's the whole, purpose of it. That's the whole
Yep,
beauty of it is like we're so new in this medium that we get to create the rules that work best for us. Surround yourself with really good people who have your best interest at heart and who are rooting you on and they're rooting you on. And like you literally can't go wrong.
exactly right. Katie Krimitsos, ladies and gentlemen. Let's make sure people get plugged into your women's meditation universe. I think you should rename it instead of the Women's Meditation Network. It should be called the Women's Meditation Death Star. I
Death
mean,
Star.
it
What it
rolls off the tongue.
Oh my gosh, my husband's gonna kill me for not knowing this, but, what is the whole, like, Marvel metaverse or something like that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I've got new series coming out all the time.
And now the spin-off, the
I know.
multiverse.
I know, the
Yeah.
multiverse, thank you, yeah.
You could be the Doctor Strange of meditation,
There you
and
go.
how exciting would that be? All right,
There
where
you
do
go.
we go to plug in on social, online, all the things?
Yeah, so we're at whatever podcast player you're listening on now, go type in Women's Meditation Network or Meditation for Women. Either one of those will work. You'll see all of our shows that are there. Go subscribe to anyone, all of them that you resonate with, that feel good, that you would want to try. I really pride ourselves on not only do we have a lot of really great content, but like it's really phenomenal content. I really consider us some of the best quality meditations that are out there. They're very different. They're poetic. They're very like my little pieces of art that we put out there. So I feel very confident that you will find something that you love. Or go to womensmeditationnetwork.com. You can see all of our content there as well. Or you can find me on Instagram and Facebook, Women's Meditation Network, or Katie Krimitsos.
Amazing. Katie, congrats on being 10% of the way to 1 billion downloads.
I like
That's
that.
that's the
See,
way I
that's
look
mind
at it.
expansion.
That's the way I look at it.
Yes, yes.
So you're somebody I look up to in the space. You and Chris do awesome things with the Podfest community. I like your vibe. I like how you show up and you always have positive energy, big ideas, and you're willing to share. So I appreciate you sharing some more time here on Podcasting Business School.
Adam, you're amazing. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, Pod Pals. I hope you took notes, and I hope that you're ready to take action off of some of the knowledge that Katie dispensed here on this episode. A lot of really interesting ideas to consider. So with that, as always, I'm going to send you out into the world wishing you health, happiness, and many downloads. We will see you next time.